Hey guys, this is Mr. Howard. This is part two of section one, dealing specifically with primary industries. And we're going to go ahead and continue our study of primary industries. Now, as we were kind of going over, going back to section one, part one, and dealing with the acronym FAM, which represents fishing, forestry, agriculture, and mining, we're going to now direct our attention to fishing. All right. Now, fishing indeed is a very important component to the supply of meat or poultry to the earth. All right. Now, for example, a lot of us, whenever we hear about meat, we always think about, the regular chicken, beef, things of that sort, pork. We hear about that. But fishing is a very, very, very important element to the world's access to quality meat. So make sure you write down in your notes that seafood is the world's second largest export commodity. All right. Very, very important. Seafood is the world's second largest export commodity, trailing only oil. Okay. Now I want to make sure you guys understand how major that is. All right. It's very easy to grow seafood. It's a lot more easier to have seafood or to gain access to it than, let's say, cows or chicken. All right, it's a lot easier to grow just hundreds and thousands of fish within a pond or a lake. All right, that is also on the same land that you own, that you also farm on. So you have some farmers that had lakes that they owned, that they were able to not only fish for their own personal usages, but they were also able to fish and add that to the meat supply that was connected to the livestock and cattle on their farmland, and then sell both entities as additional revenue streams. All right. So, in essence, fishing is a very important contributor to not only the economic development of farmers, but more so just the maintenance of our survival as humankind here in this earth. All right, so make sure you highlight that. Now, the seafood industry includes essentially two varieties. Make sure you write this down. Make sure you remember this for your quiz. Fish and seaweed. Fish and seaweed, they both go hand in hand. Within the seafood industry, all right, there are relatively two elements or methods that are utilized in order to obtain both of these entities. Now you have the first one, which is capture. Make sure you write that down. Make sure you place a Q next to that. Products that are gathered in wild and natural states. All right, for example, you'll see in stores where you have certain fish that are earmarked on their packages as wild caught. Okay, wild caught snapper, wild caught salmon. All right, this would be an example of capture. All right, another element would be aquaculture, which is the cultivation or farming in a controlled artificial environment. So this is where you would have certain companies that would develop artificial environments for fish to reside in and to grow in order to provide a more controlled environment for the fish to respectively grow. And then eventually they'll go ahead, once they get to a certain weight, then they will go ahead and take those fish out and then um, go ahead and sell them for profit. All right, so that's where we see these two methodologies that are utilized in order to obtain fish and seaweed within the area. Now, when we're talking about some of the countries who are the leading producers of fish or seafood in the world, you definitely have to talk about China. China produces the greatest amount of fish in the world, bar none. Make sure you write that down. Make sure you remember that for your quiz. There will be a question on your quiz and test asking about that. Check this out. They contribute roughly 69% of the world's cultivated fish. That is an overwhelming majority, almost. Okay, it's almost 75%. Make sure you write that down. Make sure you remember that for your quiz. Now, in terms of consumer base, now the largest consumer base within the world's market in terms of the consumption of fish, all right, will be Japan. All right. Make sure you write that down in your notes. Japan is the consumer of the largest amount of fish in the world. Now, this is big business. Seafood is a large entity within itself in terms of the economy. But do not sleep on seaweed. Seaweed production is a $6 billion a year industry. And what a lot of people don't know is that seaweed is utilized in a plethora of forms. For example, seaweed is utilized in fertilizers for farmlands, cosmetics for women, all right, in terms of various face treatments, various things that are utilized for their hair, also fuels, wastewater treatments. Okay, these are some of the examples of how seaweed production is really a very lucrative industry. All right, in fact, it's one of the more underestimated industries in terms of its ability to generate capital in the world. All right. Now, make sure you write down in your notes that roughly 35 countries at this point harvest seaweed. All right. But the largest producers of seaweed are China, Japan, and South Korea, all connected to the Asian continent. All right. Their diet within their culture is heavily dependent upon the consumption of seafood and seaweed, and also various herbs that are connected to herbal teas. They consume a lot of rice. That's one of the main cash crops that they utilize, produce, and consume. All right, so make sure you bear that in mind. All three countries are also the world's largest consumers of seaweed. All right, so they not only are the largest producers, but they're also the largest consumers. And because they're the largest consumers, and places such as China has so many people, okay, you're talking about 1.3 billion people that reside in China. All right, that means there is a very heavy demand for seaweed and seafood within just that country alone. Okay. Now let's go to the second F, dealing with forestry. Now, as we indicated in section one briefly, wood is another necessity of life, and the size of forestry products within the forestry industry definitely has proven that. All right. For example, consider what is made from one tree. You can have fruit, nuts, which connects to food products. The leaves are utilized for crayons for children in school, lipstick for women, various fragrances, okay, that is utilized by both men and women, all right, that provides certain scents, all right. The branches are utilized for chemicals and plastics, all right. The bark from the wood um, actually contributes to the formation of various medicines, chemical dyes, and shoe polish for leather based shoes. The trunk of the tree is actually being utilized for furniture, musical instruments such as guitars, violins, cellos. All right. Also, baseball bats, believe it or not. All right. When you think about it. All right. So, all of these elements are connected to one tree. All these various products are connected to one tree. So, when you're looking at the forestry industry, all right, don't just look at this one tree as just something that just makes money or provides paper. There are many usages, okay, that that tree provides to companies that are invested in that industry. All right. Another element, sap. The sap from the tree is also utilized for ice cream. When you're talking about different syrups, from maple syrups, for example, from the maple tree. All right. Hairspray, various soaps, okay, are definitely connected to sap as well. All right. The tree stumps, believe it or not, has been utilized in various sports drinks, and also in laundry detergent. So we see that there is so many, there are so many ways in which a tree um, provides us with various accesses to quality products that we definitely need as human beings on a day-to-day basis. Now, when we're talking about mining, mining is also very important. As important agriculture, fishing, and forestry are, they're indeed important. But mining has definitely surpassed them in importance. And let me show you why. Now, when you're looking at mining, this is where we start talking about various metals, okay, non-metals, as well as fossil fuels. Make sure you mark down, write down, highlight, and remember that the three types of resources that are definitely connected to the mining industry are metals, non-metals, and fossil fuels. All three are essential to day-to-day activities of human beings in the earth. Now let's go back to certain elements of the Earth's crust. Now, when we're talking about the Earth's crust, it's composed mainly of rock that contains a variety of minerals. These minerals are solid crystals that are naturally occurring and have a certain element of chemical composition. All right. In return, these minerals have really been very impactful within the scientific community. In fact, make sure you write this down. Roughly 3,000 different minerals have been identified by scientists, but roughly only 100 of them, as an estimate, are common in terms of its everyday usage. Okay, so make sure you write that down. That might be a true false question, so be on the lookout for that. Okay. Metals are indeed the most important type of mineral source because it lasts longer and works better than tools made from wood or stone. All right, so make sure you write that down. All right, metals are indefinitely important type of mineral source within the earth. The first metal worker, believe it or not, going back to biblical studies, was Tubal Cain, a descendant of Cain who became a very important instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. All right, make sure you write down brass and iron as the two components that were primary within Tubal Cain's um, work in the metal industry at that point in time. All right, so make sure you write that down. Make sure you remember that. Now, Tubal Cain obviously is just one of the sons of Cain. When you get into world history next year, we'll definitely deal specifically with that. All right, but make sure you write down brass and iron as the two metals that he was prominent in utilizing. Okay. Now, archaeologists have sometimes divided ancient civilizations into three periods that reflect man's increasing skill with those various metals. For example, you have the Stone slash Copper Age, which took place before 3000 BC. You have the Bronze Age, which is from 3000 to 1200 BC. And you also have the Iron Age, which we're currently in right now, which took place from 1200 BC to present. And as you can see around us all throughout the course of this world, iron is still utilized to this very day. For example, in order to quote unquote iron your clothes, you have the formation of iron that's utilized in a steaming device that's utilized in order to, in turn, iron the take the wrinkles out of your clothes. All right, there's so many different usages in which iron has been used. So make sure you bear that in mind. These are the three ages. Make sure you highlight all three. Make sure you know the time period in which all three manifested. Okay. Another thing to consider are the three types of metals. We have precious metals, common metals, alloys. All right. Now, these precious metals primarily consist of various metals such as gold, silver, platinum. All right. These are considered precious. In fact, in the economic markets, you will see that gold, silver, and platinum are traded for profits based upon their value. Okay, common metals as well is another type of metal. Metals such as copper, lead, and iron are some of the more common metals that are utilized on a day to day basis. For example, copper is primarily used for our coins. We have lead that's utilized for our pencils. Iron, as we indicated earlier, is utilized for many of its products. We have iron that's utilized for our clothes. We have iron that's utilized in order to create certain pieces of furniture. Um, Iron is utilized within building infrastructures coupled with steel. We see a lot of these elements unfold as precious commodities to the global marketplace. Also, make sure you highlight that iron is mined more than all the other common metals combined. It's very prominent, hence the reason why we are still in the Iron Age. That will also give you a hint as to how prominent it is. All right, so make sure you write that down in your notes as an important point to remember. And lastly, now alloys. Now alloys is just a combination of copper, lead, and iron, aluminum, and other metals into one entity. all right, which is another common practice within the metal industry. So make sure you write that down. Now, when we're talking about non-metal minerals, minerals that are considered non-metals, they're not only useful in just the context of limestone, okay, which is also utilized for cement, but they're also utilized in different manners, such as gunpowder, when you're talking about sulfur and sulfuric acid, and it providing a combustive component and element to gunpowder. When you're talking about uranium, which was utilized in atomic bombs in 1945, as well as nuclear reactors in the present time. Uranium is very essential to bombing mechanisms. All right, that's utilized primarily for militaristic purposes and warfare. All right, so make sure you mark that down. And lastly, let's deal with fossil fuels, which is very, very, very important. Fossil fuels and its utilization and prominence is still relatively new. Only in the last 200 years has mankind, or specifically scientists, I should say, realized the potential of another energy source, which are fossil fuels. And this is going back to part one of section one of chapter three, when we were talking about how we begin to see the infusion of science and machinery in the farming industry. But check this out: it wasn't just in that industry. We also began to see how they were taking some of these organic materials, all right, in the form of fossil fuels, and utilizing science and machinery in order to then convert them into quality materials that can be utilized as an energy source, okay, for other products. For example, make sure you highlight some of the main fossil fuels are coal, petroleum, and natural gas. Okay. Now, coal is a solid rock that occurs in various levels of quality depending on the amount of heat produced per pound. Oh, so this is where we started seeing a lot of coal that was being generated in different um, businesses throughout the North, primarily, especially during the 1800s and the 1900s. This is where we began to see various mining mills growing in prominence, both in coal and eventually steel over time. Petroleum is definitely a vital resource to many products that are contributed to our everyday lives today. For example, we need petroleum in gas that's utilized for our cars and in other mechanisms as well. Now, petroleum is a liquid fossil fuel. In fact, believe it or not, going back to Old Testament biblical times, Noah used pitch. Now, pitch is actually, this is very interesting. Pitch is actually a very thick form of petroleum that was actually utilized by Noah to cover the ark. And what this did was it preserved the ark and the wood against the water. All right, so that eventually the sustainability of the wood over time would actually increase because it was covered with this very thick form of petroleum called pitch at the time. And this is how the ark was also able to withstand the pressures of not just the water, but also the potential erosion of the wood as a result of the water. All right, so just goes to show you how Noah was able to pull that off in the building of the ark. All right, if you need to reference that, just go to Genesis chapter 6, verse 14 in order to confirm that particular point. And lastly, dealing with natural gas. Natural gas, fossil fuel gas located in underground oil pools. Now, this is very important. Natural gas is essential to our everyday lives. Some stoves that we utilize in our homes are also connected to this as well, obviously in a controlled manner. But these are some of the world leaders in fossil fuels. Now, the leading coal producers are China, the United States, India, and Australia. The leading oil producers, believe it or not, is Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and Iran, all located, obviously, in the Middle East. All right, which is has one of the largest levels of accessibility to natural oil in the world. And lastly, the leading gas producers are connected to Russia, the United States, Canada, and the UK. All right, so these are the world's leaders in fossil fuels within their respective spheres and industries. And in essence, this concludes primary industries section 1. Make sure you keep notes handy in preparation for your quiz and tests. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Take care, and I'll see you in section 2, dealing with secondary industries. God bless.